You can have you.
Main event of the evening.
Ready to race to you.
These days are
Hello and welcome to These Days Are Ours, a Happy Days podcast. I'm Peter.
And I'm Joe.
And today, we will be discussing Season 4, Episode 18, Graduation, Part 1.
Okay, Peter, tell us what happens in Graduation Part 1.
We open at the Cunningham house, where Howard is trying on a baby blue tuxedo with sequined lapels and a sequined bow tie that he'll be wearing when he chaperones the prom. Howard doesn't care for it.
I asked you to rent me just a plain black tuxedo.
Until Marion says it gives him pizzazz. Then Joni comes downstairs and asks if the tux comes with batteries. Richie, Potsy, and Ralph come home from what was supposed to be their gig at a bar mitzvah. Ralph lost the address in his glove compartment. He and Potsy make fun of Howard's tuxedo.
Is he gonna be a chaperone, or are they hanging him from the middle of the gym and spinning him?
I'm gonna spin you.
No, Dad, please don't.
And Marion has to send him upstairs before he can attack Potsy, with Joni assuring him it's a great tux. Jenny Piccolo has a nightgown just like it. The guys sit down on the couch, annoyed they can't find the address in the glove compartment because Ralph's car is locked in Fonzie's garage, and they can't find Fonzie. It's Friday night, and every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday night, Fonzie meets with some mystery lady. Richie tries to jog Ralph's memory, but Ralph only gets as far as the place having a girl's name in it.
We'll never find it. That's hopeless. My whole life is hopeless.
Yeah, we know that, Ralph.
As they look through the phone book, Marion says to wait until Fonzie gets home at 9:30. Richie asks his mother how she knows what time Fonzie is coming home, and Ralph and Potsy try and intimidate her into telling them where Fonzie is.
We need information, and we need it now.
Richie uses the guilt tactic. Without the bar mitzvah, they won't have any money for their senior prom.
I will tell you, but you have got to promise that you won't tell us so.
And Marion eventually admits that Fonzie has been taking night classes at Jefferson High School. At Jefferson High, Fonzie's teacher asked him to read tonight's poem.
I Love You by Ella Wheeler Wilcox. I love your lips when they're wet with wine and red with wild desire.
A love poem that prominently mentions lips. Fonzie reads it to one of his classmates, an attractive French girl named Michelle, culminating in them making out, much to the horror of the teacher, as Richie, Potsy, and Ralph show up. The teacher calls for a 10-minute break.
The class will take a 10-minute break to cool off.
And the trio approach Fonzie, who isn't too happy to see them, and not just because they interrupted him necking. Richie admits Marion told them where he was, but only because it was an emergency. Ralph suddenly remembers the name of the place is Beth Israel.
The name of the place is Beth. I knew it was a girl's name, Beth Israel.
And they leave so they aren't late for their gig. Richie stays behind to make awkward small talk with Fonzie,
What are you studying? Foreign relations?
then leaves. Before he starts making out with Michelle again, Fonzie tells her they don't know it yet, but those are his pals, and he's going to graduate with them. Michelle doesn't seem to understand. The night of the prom, Richie leaves home early. His date Arlene's parents want to take some home movies of her and Richie. Richie is planning to do his Jimmy Stewart impression.
I was thinking I might do my Jimmy Stewart impression.
He also assures Marion that he and his friends haven't told anyone about Fonzie attending night school. Joni enters, and Richie immediately assumes that Joni's going to compare him to Casper, or Guy Lombardo, or the Good Humor Man. But no, Joni tells her brother he looks very handsome, and waits until Richie leaves to tell Marion that he really did look like Casper the Friendly Ghost. Then she asks,
Mom, did you hear the news? Fonzie's going to night school.
No.
Joni heard about it from Jenny Piccolo. At the prom, Al's performing I Love a Parade with the band.
I love a parade. The tramping of feet. I love every beat I hear from a drum.
Arlene tells Richie she loves her corsage, and Richie tells Arlene he has something special planned after prom, watching the sunrise together. As Ralph and his date Kim enter, Kim complains about her corsage, a massive bird of paradise with the stem and roots still attached. Potsy reveals that Ralph's father has them growing in his yard. Ralph says he gave her the personal touch. He ripped it out of the ground himself.
Couldn't you cut off the roots?
As they dance together, Ralph says he loves it when Kim hums in his ear, and Kim says that isn't her, she has a bee in her corsage. When the song draws to a close, Al announces Fonzie's entrance with Michelle. Fonzie gets on stage and gives a speech explaining why he's in night school. Not to be a teacher or pick up chicks or win the Nobel Peace Prize.
Somebody even said that I was studying to get the Nobel Peace Prize.
That was mine.
He wanted it to be a surprise. But since loose lips sink ships, Fonzie formally announces that he'll be graduating as a senior alongside all of them. Afterwards, he gives Marion the cold shoulder. At the punch bowl, Howard tells Fonzie he doesn't blame him for being mad at Marion, but she does do a lot of nice things for Fonzie too. Making him breakfast, filling his thermos, cooking his vegetables, and there comes a time in everyone's life when they make at least one mistake. Fonzie and Marion meet up, and Fonzie kisses her on the cheek in apology. Marion kisses him on the cheek, and they dance together. Later, Al calls Posse on stage to sing a song, Deeply, and the episode turns into a music video for like 2 minutes as Posse sings a 70s slow jam. It's weird.
You ask, is my love real? All I can say is how I feel. Deeply, deeply as can be.
Afterwards, Raul tells his friends and their dates that after they play Goodnight Sweetheart, they're gonna split. Then Vice Principal Connors, who once ordered a fire drill in the rain, shows up to make an announcement. Everyone failed Coach McMillan's health and hygiene exam.
This class is nothing but a sham.
One genius thought that a patella was a nickel cigar.
And anyone who wants to graduate has to take another exam tomorrow at 8:30. On his way out, Connors tells Howard and Marion to tell any seniors who weren't present about the news. He's heard that Marion is good at spreading information. The guy states all leave them to go home and study. Howard tells the guys they'll be doing the same, and Marion takes him to go make coffee at home. The guys complain of the punch bowl.
I can't believe this. Of all nights,
We're not going to graduate. We'll be stuck here for another year. What are we going to do? I don't believe.
And Fonzie interrupts to tell them they're going to study, and they're going to pass the test. Tomorrow is graduation, one of the most important days of their lives.
Got your big five. You got life, you got death, you got marriage, you got graduation.
He wants them in his apartment in 20 minutes, because he's going to help them study their little heads off. Once they're gone, and the band starts playing Goodnight Sweetheart, Fonzie has one last dance with Michelle, reasoning his friends can start without him. Then we get a montage of stuff that will happen in the next episode, which we'll be discussing next week, so no need to get into it now.
Thank you so much, Peter. That was Graduation Part 1, which first aired back on February 8th, 1977. On that glorious night, Happy Days was the lead-in to a brand new Laverne and Shirley in which the girls go on a disastrous double date. Meanwhile, CBS had a new episode of its news magazine, Who's Who. And on NBC, there was a new episode of Baba Black Sheep in which Robert Conrad's character, Pappy, is dragged into military court after he is accused of having American troops strafed. Graduation Part 1 was directed by Jerry Paris, and it was written by a guy named Calvin Kelly. This was his first and only Happy Days writing credit. Calvin wrote for a lot of the big shows in the 70s and 80s, including Sanford and Son, All in the Family, Benson, Three's Company, Different Strokes, Dukes of Hazzard, The Jeffersons, and The Rockford Files, for which he was nominated for a Writers Guild Award. In the mid-1980s, though, he wrote many of the episodes of the Dennis the Menace animated series.
They sell ginger here? I think so. Let's try that way.
Our guest stars this week, we have a lot of them, mostly returnees to the show. We'll start with Dick Van Patten as Vice Principal Connors. Dick had previously played Mr. Hunsberger in Fonzie the Salesman last season. By this time, he was starring in the comedy drama 8 is Enough, also on ABC.
There's nothing quite like them on television. The Bradfords, not your typical family of 8 children.
I don't wear nightgowns anymore, Daddy.
So, Peter, what did you think of Dick Van Patten as Vice Principal Connors?
We only get a little bit of him, but from what we do get of him, we get the sense that he's the Officer Kirk of the public school set.
That was my impression, too. I was astonished when you just said that, because that was going to be my take on him, was that he was the educational equivalent of Officer Kirk. He's this little martinet trying to control the world through this office that he's been given, which is the assistant principalship of a Milwaukee high school.
Although, maybe he has a point if everyone apparently failed the health and hygiene exam. Although that feels like, at that point, you want to grade on a curve. But maybe that's Coach McMillan's fault. I don't know.
When I discuss my notes for the episode, I'll talk about the plausibility of this particular storyline. But I think Dick Van Patten is actually kind of fun, playing this twerpy little assistant principal. I think he's kind of a fun character, and I think Dick Van Patten plays it pretty well. But we'll get a lot more Vice Principal Connors next week. We also have Seal Cabot as our night school teacher. Seal had previously appeared as a nun in Fonzie Loves Pinky Part 3, and she'll be back in Season 9. Did you have any thoughts on Seal Cabot as our night school teacher?
When she called for a 10-minute break because Fonzie and Michelle started making out, I kind of got the sense that this had happened before, and rather than try and wrench them apart, she was just going to give them time to finish up and then get back to teaching, which is fairly practical, I would say.
This is a very interesting night school class, and I can only imagine what the burly Teamster-looking guys in the background of the class are thinking during all this. Speaking of that class, though, our next guest star is the delightfully named Lisa Pelican as Michelle, our French student. A very accomplished actress of stage and screen, Lisa has been active in TV and film since the mid-70s, a protege of Lauren Bacall, and a graduate of Mother Flippin' Juilliard. Lisa was actually born in Paris and raised in Italy and Japan since her father was an international businessman and diplomat. You may have seen her in films like Julia, Ghoulies, Return to the Blue Lagoon, Swing Shift, and much more. Her TV credits include Murder, She Wrote, Remington Steele, and Law & Order SVU. She's also the title character in a 1978 horror film called Jennifer.
Hey, Jennifer.
Please give me back my clothes.
which is like a ripoff of Carrie, which makes her a very interesting prom date. So what did you think of Lisa Pelican as Michelle?
She was fairly amusing, although I will say that the running joke of her not really understanding what Fonzie was saying was maybe mildly uncomfortable. At least she seemed to get the gist of what he was saying, so...
Obviously, this is another one of those girlfriend of the week characters for Fonzie. I was actually surprised that Lisa Pelican had incredible credentials. She had all this acting training background, and she was obviously a very serious and dedicated actress. There's more to Lisa Pelican than meets the eye. I don't know that she's been given her full opportunity to do whatever she can do in this role. We also have Lorette Sprang as Arlene. Lorette had previously played Arlene in season 1's Breaking Up is Hard to Do.
And now she's back!
Yeah, so they went to the junior prom in season 1, and now 3 seasons later they're going to the senior prom? How does that work? Lorette was also Denise in season 2's Kiss Me Sickly, and she'll be Wendy in next season's Hollywood 3-parter. So Lorette Sprang obviously contains multitudes. What did you think of her as Arlene this week?
In season 1, Richie briefly had a girlfriend named Arlene, and they broke up right before junior prom and then got back together so that they would have a date for the junior prom, and neither of them would have to go alone. It's a very fun episode, albeit one where Richie does not come off looking well. It's fun to have a character from season 1 return, and it's fun to have confirmation that, yeah, that is still in canon, possibly. I just wish that we could have gotten Trudy to also return.
I wish they were more careful with cultivating and bringing back those supporting characters. Trudy is another character that I miss a lot from those early episodes, and Bag and Moose.
Oh yeah, Moose.
We also have Linda Goodfriend as Kim. Linda had previously played Kim earlier this season in Time Capsule, and she'll go on to play Lori Beth next season and for the rest of the run of Happy Days. At the time of this episode, she was mere days away from her debut in Blansky's Beauties.
I'm Sunshine. I'm looking for a man.
So what did you think of Linda Goodfriend as Kim?
She had the best joke in the episode, which was the fact that Ralph Malph is a very bad date who will get you a corsage that still has a bee in it and claim that he just gave you the personal touch. I laughed. I felt bad for her. She was great. And I can definitely see why she was the one who stuck around after this, because she was very funny.
I thought Linda Goodfriend was one of the funnier parts of this episode, although I did feel sorry for her character, Kim. She has a pretty lousy senior prom, and she gets stung by a bee in the face, which is a bad night. We also have Sally Hightower as Sylvia, Potsy's date. Sally had previously been an extra in Fonzie the Superstar and Fonzie's Old Lady. She'll keep making occasional appearances on Happy Days through season 5. So she was one of those background extras who was, for this week, promoted to a speaking character. Her other credits include Welcome Back, Kotter, The Jeffersons, and my favorite, Willing to Kill, the Texas cheerleader story from 1992.
The Channel View woman charged with hiring a contract murderer to kill the mother of a middle school cheerleader is out on bond today.
Did Sally Hightower as Sylvia make any kind of impression on you?
She probably got the least to do out of the 4 prom dates. But what she did get to do, which was tell Potsy that nope, they were not going to watch the sunrise, they were going to go home and study, was pretty funny, so good on her.
We're not watching any sunrise. We've got to go to Kim's and study.
Yeah, I thought that one line was probably Sally Hightower's high point in this episode. Her real purpose is to be the person to whom Potsy sings deeply, which has to be an awkward experience for her because this is, I think, their first date. And he's singing this very romantic song about how he's never known such love before. And she has to kind of just sit there and be appreciative of it for a couple of minutes of screen time.
She just has to listen to this bizarrely 70s song. Do you think that she was confused at all about it? Or do you think that in Happy Days world, it sounded perfectly normal to her?
I don't know. Everyone else seems to think of it as normal, so she probably does too. I just think that in that kind of situation, when you're being sung to, it's kind of an out-of-body experience. You're probably just waiting for this to be over. Kind of like when people sing happy birthday to you when it's your birthday, where you have to just sort of smile and nod and wait for the song to be over. Mm-hmm. I think that's what Sylvia's doing here. We also have a cameo by Gary Marshall as a drummer.
The rat-a-tat, the blare from a horn.
Gary had previously played a drummer in season 2's Fonzie's Getting Married. This is supposedly his last on-camera appearance on Happy Days. Like Linda Goodfriend, though, he'll be a cast member on Blansky's Beauties. Any comment on Gary Marshall as our drummer?
He was pretty fun. It's always nice to see him make an appearance.
And on Blansky's Beauties, his character is the sinister and vaguely mob-connected owner of the Oasis Hotel. So that's an odd part that he gave to himself on that show. As for songs this week, boy, do we have a bunch of them. We start with I Love a Parade by Al Molinaro with Gary Marshall and the band. It was originally written back in 1931 by Harold Arlen and Ted Koehler for a review called Rhythm Mania at the notorious Cotton Club in New York. Duke Ellington was the band leader at that review. Blueberry Hill is, of course, performed by Ron Howard. Heart and Soul is performed as an instrumental by the Prom Band, though sometimes thought of as a 1950s song thanks to hit versions by the Four Aces and the Cleftones. It actually goes back to 1938 and was written by Hoagie Carmichael with Frank Lesser. For He's a Jolly Good Fellow is performed by the Prom Band. My Old Flame is also performed by them. It's a jazz standard going back to at least 1934. The earliest recording I could find was one by Mae West, backed by Duke Ellington again, but the one I remember best is a parody by Spike Jones with Paul Frees doing his Peter Lorre impression.
My old flame. I can't even think of her name. I'll have to look through my collection of human heads.
In the Cool, Cool, Cool of the Evening is performed by the Prom Band. That's another Hoagie Carmichael song, this time with lyrics by Johnny Spencer. It debuted in the 1951 film Here Comes the Groom and won an Oscar for Best Song. Since then, it's been done by Frank Sinatra, Bing Crosby, Rosemary Clooney, Bette Midler, all the greats. I guess the song of the episode is Deeply, performed by Anson Williams. To me, it was very reminiscent of Never My Love by The Association.
You ask me if there'll come a time when I grow tired of you. You ask, is my love real? All I can say is how I feel.
This was a bit of cross-promotion on Happy Days. In 1977, Anson Williams released Deeply, backed with I Want to Believe in This One as a single on the Chelsea Records label. It peaked at number 93 in April 1977. The Prom Band performs Isn't It Romantic? We've talked about that song before. And the final song of the episode is Goodnight, Sweetheart, which is not the 1950 song Goodnight, Sweetheart, Goodnight by the Spaniels, which is what I was expecting. This is a completely different song. It was a British song from 1931 written by Ray Noble, Jimmy Campbell, and Reg Connolly. It was used in numerous films in the 30s and 40s, and it was popularized here in America by Guy Lombardo. So most of the music used at the prom is actually from the 1930s for some reason. Our cultural and historical references for the week. Marion uses a whole variety of colorful slang terms, including hep, meaning up to date or sophisticated. It actually predates hip. Spiffy means smart in appearance. Both hep and spiffy date from about the 1900s. They took off in the 1920s. Snazzy also means fashionable. It appears in the 1920s and had a very similar lifespan to that of spiffy. Pizzazz is the newbie. Pizzazz, meaning glamour and vitality, seems to have come into popularity only in the 1950s. Mary Jane Mae West is the notorious actress, singer, and playwright who, through her work in all media, portrayed herself as a free-living sexual libertine.
Oh, let me feel your fingers running through my hair. I can give you kisses till you walk on air. Love me, honey, love me till I just don't care. I'm no angel.
Famed for her double entendres and risque material, she dealt with censorship frequently in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s. For decades, even past her death in 1980, she was an icon of immorality. If in a cartoon or a comedy sketch you wanted to quickly convey that a woman was of loose morals, you just had her talk in a Mae West voice.
You did such a good job tampering with Miss Chadwick's hot, nourishing blood that we are thinking of giving you a raise.
Well, gee, thanks, Mr. Belshazzar.
In the night school classroom, there's a poster on the wall showing the Declaration of Independence and portraits of the 56 signers. This particular poster was actually manufactured in the 70s, and my guess is that it was made to commemorate the bicentennial. We get a poem by Ella Wheeler Wilcox.
Ella Wheeler Wilcox, I love you. I love your lips when they're wet with wine and red with a wild desire. I love your eyes when the love light lies lit with a passionate fire.
Ella Wheeler Wilcox was a very real American poetess. She was actually born in Wisconsin in 1850. I Love You is actually one of her works, though she's probably best known for the line, laugh and the world laughs with you, weep and you weep alone. Beth Israel is a common name for synagogues and temples. Beth Israel simply means House of Israel. There are several synagogues, temples, and centers with that name in Wisconsin. For Richie and the gang, the closest one is Congregation Beth Israel in Glendale, a suburb of Milwaukee. So I assume that's where they're going. That's about a 15-minute drive for them. Jimmy Stewart is mentioned. Jimmy Stewart was the Pennsylvania-born actor best known for films like Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, The Philadelphia Story, It's a Wonderful Life, and a whole string of Hitchcock films like Rope, Rear Window, and Vertigo. He had a very distinctive, much imitated voice, and he actually did radio shows between films. So, Peter, what did you think of Richie's impression of Jimmy Stewart?
It sounded exactly like what someone doing a Jimmy Stewart impression sounds like. It gets across everything that people think of when they think of Jimmy Stewart. and that's really all that anyone can be asked.
Jimmy Stewart is one of those hacky impressions that people have done for years. I think you can file him alongside Edward G. Robinson, Humphrey Bogart, Jimmy Cagney, and Ed Sullivan as like one of the most cliched ones that you could do. I thought Richie was a little nasal for my taste.
I got some real pork chops and apple chops vibes from him, even though that's a completely different impression.
What's for dinner? Pork chops. Pork chops. What else? Applesauce? Pork chops and applesauce. That's swell.
Casper the Friendly Ghost actually made his debut in a 1945 theatrical cartoon. He was originally intended to be the main character in a children's book, but it was never published. Casper made his comic book debut in 1949, and for years his comics career actually outshone his animation career. But in 1995, he got a major motion picture with Bill Pullman and Christina Ricci. Guy Lombardo was an extremely popular Canadian band leader who sold millions of records in the 20s, 30s, and 40s with his Royal Canadians and their smooth-sounding big band jazz. The tuxedo-clad Lombardo was especially known for his New Year's Eve performances. Unfortunately, Guy played his last New Year's Eve show in 1976, right before this episode aired. He died in November 1977 at the age of 75. Good Humor is an ice cream manufacturer, started in Youngstown, Ohio in 1920. For years, the company was known for its distinctive street vendors, the so-called Good Humor men, generally clad in white and selling their wares from trucks, pushcarts, and bicycles. In 1950, there was even a film called The Good Humor Man, starring Jack Carson. Do you have actual ice cream vendors in your neighborhood? Do you have ice cream men that come by?
Well, we did in the before time, but generally I don't think that they wore uniforms.
No, I don't think I've ever seen one dressed in all white the way they were back in the 50s. The Nobel Peace Prize has been awarded pretty much annually since 1901 by the Nobel Committee in Oslo, Norway. They take the year off occasionally. For instance, the Peace Prize was not awarded during World War II. It's one of the most prestigious and controversial awards in the world. Loose lips is a reference to a World War II propaganda poster that warned loose lips might sink ships. And for your information, Potsy, the patella is the kneecap. It is a bone, not a nickel cigar. I guess the joke here is that the word patella sounds like the brand name of a cigar, because there are real cigars called the Cohiba, the Corona, and the Romeo y Julieta.
Well, the joke is also that Potsy is very dumb.
That's always the joke on Happy Days. When Fawn says departez-vous, that's a bit of mangled French. I think what he means is partez-vous, which means are you leaving? Other observations. Boy, those matching suits and ties really do give Richie and the band a nice professional look, don't they?
They really do.
And those striped ties, oh, they just look fantastic, like $1 million. The dynamic in the opening scene is so odd. 1 minute Potsy and Ralph are threatening Mrs. C. The next, Mrs. C is threatening Ralph. Who knew these people were all suppressing their violent urges?
Well, like you've said before, on a show called Happy Days, there's a lot of pressure for everyone to be happy all the time, so they've got a lot of repressed emotions to work through.
And sometimes they bubble up in unpleasant ways, like in this scene.
They really do.
We're getting closer and closer to Correctamundo. This week it's Correcto and Incorrecto. I keep losing hope that we're ever going to get to Correctamundo, but you promised me that it's going to happen?
It's going to happen.
It's kind of weird that Kim is dating Ralph now, since she and Richie got along so well in Time Capsule. What do you think happened there?
My guess is that Richie asked his old girlfriend to the prom, and Kim kind of had to settle for Ralph, and now she's wishing that she just stayed home.
Yeah, that probably would have been a better night for Kim all around. I like that we get continual updates on the two wallflowers at the prom. Throughout the prom scenes, we see this boy and girl, and they're sitting by the wall, and then over the course of the night, they actually get closer and closer together, and that's kind of nice.
It is. It's very nice.
And at the end of the night, I think they're the only two who are not panicked and run home to study for the hygiene test.
Good for them.
The big color wheels from Dance Contest are back. These are these giant multicolored wheels that you spin around to create different lighting effects. I still don't understand why these cannot be automated, but apparently you have to operate them by hand.
Big wheel keep on turning. Proud Mary keep on burning.
If you dig the music of Anson Williams, boy, this is the episode for you. He gets a full-fledged music video, complete with a special lighting effect.
It was very disco-y, despite the song not really calling for it. The song itself is also extremely 70s, and it sounds radically different from anything else they've done before on Happy Days, and it's very surreal.
That's the power of Anson Williams. He got to promote his brand new single on the show. It didn't help very much. It only got to 93 on the charts.
Maybe if he'd done a more 50s-ish song, it would have worked. Or maybe not.
Maybe not.
The pop career of Ansel Williams was just not meant to be.
Not meant to be. Some things just aren't meant to be. The plot twist involving Vice Principal Connors is so far-fetched, so ridiculous, and so contrary to the way that schools actually work that I could not suspend my disbelief. I'm sorry, Happy Days. There is no way that every single senior would have been in the same hygiene class and that they would have flunked the same test. There's no way everyone's graduation, including that of the valedictorian, would hinge on this one test. There's no way the makeup test would be held the morning after the prom. There would be an uproar from the student body and the parents and probably faculty. My only explanation is that, again, the vice principal of the school has far exceeded his authority, and he's gone rogue here.
It's beginning to look like General Ripper exceeded his authority.
It certainly does. Far beyond the point I would have imagined possible.
My guess is that maybe Coach McMillan is just a really bad teacher if all of his students failed their tests. At some point or another, you have to ask yourself, okay, maybe it's not entirely the student's fault.
My guess is that Coach McMillan was hired to be a coach and not really a teacher, and so he's really half-assing the hygiene class that he's supposed to be teaching. So, Peter, were there any outstanding Happy Days fashions this week?
We talked about the uniforms that Richie, Potsy, and Ralph were wearing for their band gig, but for me, the outfit of the episode was undeniably Howard's chaperone tux for the prom, which, as I mentioned before, was baby blue with sequined lapels and a sequined bow tie, and it looks great, and I want it.
That is an unbelievable tuxedo, and I'm glad that he chose to actually wear it to the dance, although I didn't think that was ever in doubt. I also want to point out Marion Ross's dress that she wears as a chaperone. It's a red full-length gown with the long gloves, the opera-length gloves. And what I thought was really unusual about that dress is that it's so similar to the dress that Julia Roberts wears in Pretty Woman, directed by Gary Marshall. So maybe he got the idea for that dress from this episode. I don't know. So, Peter, I will ask that age-old, timeless question, was this episode any good?
I think it was. It was kind of weirdly constructed. There's not really like a single antagonist or conflict in this episode. First, it's that Fonzie is missing and they need to find him, and he's secretly going into night school, and Marion accidentally labbed, and now everyone knows, and Fonzie is kind of annoyed at her, but then it gets resolved, and then the conflict is that Vice Principal Connors is going to make everyone retake a test before they can graduate. But at the same time, I won't deny that I had a really good time watching it, and are a lot of fun little jokes in it, and there's Howard's amazing tuxedo, so I can let it slide this time.
Yeah, this episode is just kind of a collection of random stuff, and I think they were trying to get this graduation padded out to 2 weeks and turn it into a major TV event. And I don't mind, because Graduation Part 1, even though it's a completely ridiculous episode, is a lot of fun to watch. You get Fonzie in night school reading poetry. You get a music video by Anson Williams. You get Dick Van Patten completely on a power trip as the vice principal of a public high school in Milwaukee. It's just a goofy romp, and if you kind of turn off the critical part of your brain, it's very enjoyable. So I actually like Graduation Part 1 quite a lot. Mm-hmm. So, Peter, tell the people how people can keep up with us and find out about all the wonderful things that we are doing.
Listeners can follow us on Twitter at Fonzie Podcast. They can follow me on Twitter at Sphericals. That's SFERICALS.
And they can follow me on Twitter at Joe_A_Blevins. They can find this podcast online at thesedaysaroours.libsyn.com. And they can email us with questions, comments, and concerns at thesedaysaroourspodcast@gmail.com. So, Peter, although I think we already know, what do we have on the docket for next week?
Next week, it's Graduation Part 2. As you may have already guessed from the fact that this is Graduation Part 1.
That's exactly what they'll be expecting us to do.
I can hardly wait to get to it. So, see you later, alligator.
In a while, crocodile.
Casper, the friendly ghost you know. The grown folks might look at him with pride. The children all love him so. Well, Casper, the friendly ghost, he couldn't be bad on me. He rock and play, sing and dance all day. The friendliest ghost you've seen. He always says hello, hello, and he's really glad to meet you wherever he may go. He's kind to every living creature. The grown-ups don't understand, but children love him the most. The kids on the way he loves them so. Casper the friendly ghost, rock it.
I was thinking I might do my Jimmy Stewart impression.